But we must remember that there were high-level meetings, that this was a high-level effort diplomatically on the part of the United States, far more high-level than it is today. And we must remember that what was put together was bringing into account international financial institutions such as the World Bank and the EBRD and the IMF were all involved in allowing for a framework that could allow for private investment to come in. That sort of pooling together of all of the resources available is not yet there at the moment when we're looking at other Southern Corridor or East-West Transport Corridor projects. But it's been done, and that's what's so confounding, is that we have been through this before, and we have done it effectively, and we have been enormously serious about it. Now, I'm not saying that the circumstances are exactly the same, BTC and Nabucco or other projects. That said, if BTC could be realized, then most other projects proposed in the region, Western-oriented projects, the framework exists for it to happen. It's a matter of the political will.
We have a question from Nadia McConnell.
Well, might be a follow-on. Alex, you talked about the population of Bulgaria. You referenced perhaps that they had become more aware of the need for diversification. That brings me to the question of, is there a constituency within Western Europe that would maybe promote diversification of energy and work within their own countries and their own governments? Because also, as you mentioned, it's in the U.S. interest that some of this happens, but likewise, I don't necessarily see any popular support within the U.S. or a recognition of the fact that what happens in this region is of self-interest to the United States.
Thank you. So constituency popular support within the U.S. and Western Europe, not necessarily Central or Eastern Europe. Frankly, there are lots of other things on the agenda. It is energy security, sometimes a difficult topic to get people to fully understand. But increasingly, we see on editorial pages and we see in public discussions and on television and so on, this issue of energy security, strategic energy security, cropping up. And you see it in the United States context in a different guise. Obviously, there are certain monikers like Middle East oil and that kind of thing. But you do see increasingly in major newspapers this discussion of the geopolitics of energy. So I think we're beginning from a very low point in terms of a genuine popular push behind decision makers, but there's certainly greater awareness. Now, how much that awareness translates into genuine pressure, I'm not sure, unless, of course, it is tied, as it ought to be, to concerns about the fate of the countries in the region, in the Black Sea Caspian region, and in Eastern Europe. And that, I think, is actually an accurate tie to make. And in order for the public, or let's say interested parties that don't look at this every day, to better understand what is at stake, and to put pressure on in a way that is meaningful for important decisions, for decision makers to be serious and for those important decisions to be made. I think what's important is an understanding of the immense geopolitical consequences of Europe not diversifying, of Europe continuing, key countries within Europe continuing to be overly dependent on Russian resources, of the fact that foreign policy decisions are compromised of the fact that when we speak about issues that are perhaps more popular, whether it is governance in Ukraine and Georgia, whether we're speaking about military supply routes for Afghanistan through the Caspian region, issues that are a bit higher on the agenda, the Georgia War of last August, on CNN 24 hours for a couple of days. None of these issues can be divorced from issues of energy security. The causes of the war last August are intimately tied to the energy relationship in the Caucasus and Russia's ambitions in terms of Caspian, in terms of securing Caspian producers to be linked into a Russian system further on to European consumers. So in that sense, if there's an understanding of the bigger picture, if you will, and the real consequences, the stakes involved, I think a genuine constituency is being built and can be furthered in Western Europe and the United States.
I would just add a footnote. One of the things to follow is the Commissioner for Competition Policy in the European Commission. That's one commissioner that's interested in diversifying the energy to the breaking up monopolies and antitrust organizations that already exist. They're looking at first they're looking at within Europe to try to break up the bundled markets of those who supply and distribute energy and trying to make them sell the parts, either sell the supplier or the distribution side, and that would help bring a little bit more transparency and competition to Europe. And I think that there's also interest within that competition policy to look at the whole issue of Russian monopoly pipelines. I mean, Russia has two monopolies that supply Europe, with one with oil, one with gas, and those are illegal under EU law. And I think there's some desire in some European groups to, in fact, enforce that. But first, Europe, I think they're looking at trying to break up some of the monopolies within Europe, and they've started that with the German electricity system. So there is some serious thought being given into this issue in Europe.
Thank you. Are there any more questions now? Ambassador Smith, you just mentioned about the two pipelines. The history of the Brotherhood gas pipeline. When it was originally being built, it was not intended to go through Ukraine. It was intended to go through Belarus, across the DDR, East Germany, into West Germany. And the West Germans protested. They didn't want the pipeline to go through East Germany. They wanted it to go through Ukraine. So if we look back at how that decision came about, and then the eventual consequences of what the problems the Germans are having now, trying to get the pipeline out of Ukraine and put it into the North Sea, we see how these things shift. Also, at the time that the Brotherhood pipeline was being built, Ukraine was the largest gas producer in the Soviet Union. It quickly ended because it was actually most of the gas that was coming from Ukraine was going into Russia at the time. So these paradoxes continue to plague us at times. I was told to be quiet to end the session. I want to thank you both very much for your wonderful presentations, and I hope to have you back here again in a week or whenever Nadia McConnell says so.